So we just had an anniversary a few days back. The 20th anniversary of the Xbox 360 launch 20 years ago. Let that settle in. 20 years ago, okay? It was a generation that set up Xbox for amazing success. I mean, nowadays it's a foreign concept, but the 360 was so successful that and the PS3 was kind of a disaster cluster, that it really was at the top of its game. I mean, they were dominating through the whole 360 era. Then came 2013, their chance to like actually go and kick some booty and really lock in their position. And as you can see, this is a post from Larry Herb. 20 years ago today, Xbox 360 launched. The power was never the console. It was you. You camped out at midnight, built lasting communities, and showed us what gaming could mean. You made that generation matter and endure for 2 decades, which is true. It's a big moment. And then Retro Gaming Grinch tweeted this, and it was all destroyed in the space of 1 hour with a picture of a man who looks vaguely like a Keebler elf, gesturing towards a gaming console, or is that a cable box, or both? Stunning. And this made me think of so many things, but there is a video that was put together by ZackLillipad, as you can see here, simply titled Xbox One, the worst generation to lose. And I think that this is, important to remember, because those who forget history are doomed to repeat it indeed. But it's also important to remember how things can always somehow be worse. The launch of the Xbox One was such an unmitigated disaster that it basically set up Xbox for an entire generation of mediocrity and missed opportunities. And it's something that they never really recovered from, which is wild, but they never really did. At the 360 era, they were at the peak. They were considered the front runners. And they managed to go from the front runners leading into the generation to losing the generation by like 2-1. The PS4 outperformed the Xbox One. And now, in the year of our Lord 2025, Xbox's consoles are being bought in like laughably low numbers. The console war, by all accounts, is basically over and done. And Xbox now is pushing towards going full third-party publisher and kind of foregoing the whole idea of being a dedicated platform. It's absolutely crazy. But what exactly happened? How did this go? Well, let's see the story as told again by the one and only ZackLillipad. Let's see what happened.
Xbox One is not really in that conversation, selling a when we talk about the least successful video game consoles of all time, the Xbox One is not really in that conversation, selling a respectable 58 million units. But as the years have gone on since that console's life cycle, it's clear some of the events that took place have left a lasting scar on the Xbox brand as a whole. In 2023, head of Xbox Phil Spencer said the Xbox One generation was the worst console generation to lose. In today's video, I want to take a look back at the Xbox One to figure out what exactly happened and what would lead to such a brutally honest quote from Phil Spencer. Microsoft was feeling...
It's true. I think it was the worst generation to lose, especially and specifically because of one market shift that happened during that era, which was the move towards digital libraries. All of platform building is about getting your customers entrenched in your ecosystem such that they can't leave. Because if you have your entire life built up on Apple devices, you have the Apple Watch, you have the headphones, you use AirPods, you have the phone, you have a MacBook that you use Apple TV, all of your shows are on Apple TV, all of your music is in Apple Music, all of this stuff. It's all tied to this ecosystem. It makes it really, really hard to switch to Android, right? Even if that flip phone is really cool, even if the folding phone is really cool, your whole life is on that platform. So you don't want to leave. They got their hooks in you. And the way Apple does it, it's not just with hardware where like literally you're buying products in their ecosystem so you don't want to lose them, but also digitally by building up your libraries, by building up your accounts, even weird social stigma stuff where it's like iPhones are cool in a lot of high schools or colleges, where like if they have the green bubble versus blue bubble, that signifies a gap in your social status. It's cringy, it's stupid, but that is a thing. It is a thing. And it's all very intentional. It's by design, certainly. Very, very much the case. Thank you, Katakuris. Thank you for the 10 for your next VRAM. Love your content. Thank you, my friend. Yeah, gotta start saving now. Just upgraded the PC. Won't have to do it again for another few years, but I'm gotta start saving now. Tell you what. Thank you. So the reason I think that this was the worst generation to lose was because in this era is when the shift from physical media to digital media took place. Gamers went from buying 10%, 5 to 10% of their games digitally to buying 90% of their games digitally. Especially going into COVID. Once COVID hit, everybody started buying games digitally. And when your whole library is digital, it's a lot harder to move. It just is. Because if I own my whole game library on the PlayStation network, no matter how cool or good of a value the Xbox is, or a Steam machine is or something, I'm still walking away from all of that, you know? Makes it really, really hard to justify giving up on all of that to move over to a different set of hardware. Whereas when it was physical, you could literally, and I remember friends who did this, where they took their stacks of games into GameStop, sold all the games, and then they used that money to buy many of the same games on the new console, on the new platform when they switched over. Digitally, you can't do that.
Pretty good after the Xbox 360 generation, and they had every right to. With just their second ever Xbox console on the market, they were able to go toe-to-toe with industry juggernaut PlayStation. And for most of the generation, they were even able to outperform them. Not only did the Xbox 360 sell extremely well, it is also one of the most beloved and fondly remembered consoles of all time. With its iconic lineup of games and innovative focus on multiplayer gaming and social features, the 360 helped truly establish Xbox as one of the big three, right alongside PlayStation and Nintendo. As they geared up for the reveal of their next console, all they really...
Dude, I miss cringy E3 presentations so bad. I deeply have contempt for Krobycat and his videos, even though I love those videos, specifically because I think they shamed game developers out of having cringy E3 presentations. Dude, they were great. Kids these days will never understand the fun and the joy that could be found in a really, really cringy E3 presentation. There's just nothing like it. Nothing like it. And now we don't have any of that. Jesse Wellens cringe.
What up, guys? Thank you for having me, EA. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Jesse Wellens, and I am a YouTube creator. So I am here to talk about Need for Speed Payback. If you guys didn't know, Need for Speed Payback, yeah, it's a great game. But all right, all set aside, I'm a YouTube creator. Need for Speed Payback, it's coming out. I got my boy Marcus, executive producer here. He is the producer in the game. Thank you, Nick, for having me.
I'm sorry. It's so good. It's so good. There's so many moments like this, dude. Ubisoft used to be the kings of this.
As far as for some of you that can't attend the entire
Konami 2010.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello everyone. 今日は、
Dude.
Welcome back to the Bethesda E3 showcase. Hashtag DE3.
We need that emote. Hold on.
The Bethesda E3 showcase.
Todd, what are you doing, Todd? Praise be, praise be. That's him bestowing blessings on us. Oh man, I really deeply miss E3 cringe compilations. And now I don't think we get them because E3's dead, for one. And two, I think I think we bullied them out of doing those types of presentations. And it's too bad, man. They were great. They were really, really great. And now we won't get those ever again, unfortunately. But maybe one day we will. Anyway, continuing.
Really had to do was build off of that momentum. Rumors first started swirling about this new console around May 2011, commonly being referred to as the Xbox 720 at that time. For the most part, the rumors are what you would expect to see from any new console that we don't know much about. There were the tame, run-of-the-mill rumors about how much more powerful the console would be than its predecessor. Then there were of course the absurdities you would see thrown out there, such as one rumor that claimed the console would have a screen on the controller, similar to Nintendo's Wii U. While these promises of more power alongside some wildly made-up rumors were to be expected, there were some other rumors floating out there that were much more concerning. Talk of Xbox 720 not supporting used games or requiring the use of the controversial Kinect accessory were heard frequently. Additionally, there was a common rumor stating that the console would be always on, or in other words, would require a constant internet connection to function, even when using features that would typically require no internet at all. Now, if there's one thing gamers hate, it's an always online requirement, and I can't blame them for that one bit. Around this time of 2012 and 2013, we saw a few different games try this, and it usually ended up pretty horrifically. The well-documented launch problems that plagued always online games in this era, like Diablo 3 or SimCity 2013, had left gamers scarred, and so the thought of having an entire console built around this was utterly terrifying. Amidst the panic of these always online rumors, we reached the first major misstep of this Xbox generation. Xbox hadn't commented on any of these rumors until one day a man by the name of Adam Orth, who at the time was creative director at Microsoft Game Studios, decided to send out a tweet. In his now infamous tweet, he stated, "Sorry, I don't get the drama around having an always-on console. Every device now is always on. That's the world we live in. Hashtag deal with it."
Telling gamers to hashtag deal with it. It's a choice. It's a choice. Can you imagine somebody doing that like today? You don't like this game? Hashtag deal with it. Like, bro, it's a bad idea. And I think that this is one of those fascinating things about the games industry specifically, is that the gaming community doesn't tolerate things. And when I say gaming community, I should be more precise. The gaming community, I'm not including like mobile gamers, okay? Maybe that's impractical or improper of me. But I mean in like console gamers, PC gamers, that's mainly what I'm talking about, okay? Those types of gamers, they do not tolerate things that other communities within entertainment tolerate. They just don't. And then you'll see executives come in and expect them to tolerate it, and then they're shocked when it doesn't go over well. You know, with like the, you all have phones, don't you? You can see an executive sitting in a boardroom going, everybody has a phone. So these people who like Diablo, we're going to give them a game they can play anywhere with any of their friends because everybody has a phone. Like, you can see how an executive would arrive at that conclusion, but it's because they fundamentally don't understand the community, right? Or in the same vein, where like they'll look at sports games and they'll be like, oh, well, you guys watch these basketball games that have constant ads, or you'll watch a football game, an American football game, and they it's like an hour of game time because it's 4 quarters of 15 minutes apiece, but each broadcast takes between 3 and 4 hours. The rest are usually filled with ads. There's like 2 to 3 hours of ads in every football game. So why don't we put just like 20 minutes of ads into your Madden game? Then we make money. You're more immersed because you're watching ads in your football game that you're playing on your console. It'll be like it'll be like a really cool meta thing or something. And you can see how they would think that they could get away with that, but it doesn't go over well. It does not go over well, you know? And it happens in so many instances. They point to the mobile gaming community and they go, they're okay with pay to win stuff. They're okay with gotcha pulls to pay to win. What do you mean you guys don't? You're also gamers, because they don't understand the distinction that you can get away with some stuff over here. You can't get away with it over here. And I think what happened is that the people that were running Microsoft at the time thought that they could run it like they ran other segments of their business, or like other people ran other market markets. And in the case of Xbox, I mean, it ended up being pretty disastrous. Because this guy, Donald Allen Matrick, he became the CEO of, or he was president of interactive entertainment business at Microsoft. And so he was in charge of this whole 360 to Xbox One transition, in charge of the Kinect and all of that stuff. And it ended up being just like a total disaster. But he previously worked at like EA before going to Microsoft, and he thought some of the stuff that they could do to strong arm people in those games they could do on the console scale, and you just can't.
As you can imagine, this tweet sent gamers into an absolute frenzy. Not only did Orth seemingly confirm the feared always online requirement, but his snarky and dismissive tone was especially infuriating. As fans tried to voice their concerns to Orth, he chose to double down.
Yeah, this also, like, the doubling down never really works in the gaming space. Sorry, I don't get the drama between around having an always online console. Every device now is always online. That's the world we live in. Manveer replied, "Did you learn nothing from Diablo 3 or Sim City? You know some people's internet goes out, right? Deal with it is a shitty reason." Orthy says, "Electricity goes out too. You've lived in LA, San Fran, Seattle, very connected places. Try living in Janesville, Wisconsin, or Blacksburg, Virginia. Why on earth would I live there?" This like contempt for their own customers. That's crazy, dude. That's crazy. And I'm sure he's going to bring it up, but you'll probably hear it because at one point, Don Matrick also said similar things where, like, for example, I think it was Jeff Keighley himself, where Jeff Keighley asked, like, so what about, servicemen and women who are deployed overseas and can't connect their Xbox One to an internet connection because, you know, they're stationed overseas, like fighting for your country. What about them? And he goes, well, we have an offline device for them. It's called the Xbox 360. Should have thought of that before becoming a soldier. Like, it's crazy. Like, again, so freaking out of touch. The idea that you would reply to somebody being like, hey, you have people that might want to buy your console in Janesville, Wisconsin, or Blacksburg, Virginia. And he's like, why would I live there? Trash. Like, it's crazy. Unbelievable.
What would happen if my internet went out? Well, the electricity can go out too. What if I live in an area without good internet accessibility? Well, you shouldn't live there. Orth tried to defend these comments by saying he was talking to a friend, and these statements were meant.
Yeah, your console doesn't turn on unless it's connected to the internet. What should I do about that? Should I just go buy a PlayStation? No, you should move. Like, move and then buy my console.
As a joke towards him, not as an insult to others. But with prior tweets coming a few hours earlier using the same talking points, which were not directed at that individual.
Yeah, same thing. Sometimes the electricity goes out. I will not purchase a vacuum cleaner. The mobile reception in the area I live in is spotty and unreliable. I will not buy a mobile phone. This fundamentally misunderstands the point people are raising, okay? This is a device which doesn't have to be online. Yes, it requires electricity. And if the internet or if the electricity goes out, you can't use it. True. But it doesn't have to be always online. And this, like, I think they think either they're outsmarting you or you're too stupid to realize what it is. It is not always online, or it wasn't planned to be always online out of the goodness of their heart or some desire to have better connectivity to increase your experience or something. It was being done to try and specifically fight against pirating, and because they wanted to be able to eventually serve you things like ads, which they were already experimenting with at the time. And so this was never about like, well, it just has to be always online. And so like if the internet drops, it doesn't work. So it's the same thing as like electricity goes out. Oh, I guess I won't buy a vacuum cleaner then. It's not the same thing because it doesn't have to always be online. It does need electricity. It doesn't have to always be online. And the only reason they're trying to force it to always be online is to try and milk you for more money, for ads, for everything else. You know, it's this contemptuous vibe for their own customers that I don't think is isolated to the games industry. I think it does happen in other forms of media. Like, I mean, even look at like for example, the Witcher TV show. Like, you're going to tell me the people writing that show don't have contempt for the source material and for the fans of that source material? No, they can't stand their own fans. And so it's not isolated to just gaming, but boy, it seems like the people that are like this in the gaming space are bafflingly bold. And this is over 10 years ago. It is not a new thing, okay? This is old school. Maybe they've just gotten better at hiding it. Maybe that's it.
This excuse becomes harder to believe. And even if you remove the privileged statements he made, Orth had still led many players to believe in the always-on rumors and caused a major PR nightmare for Xbox. Orth quickly left Microsoft a few days later, claiming it was his decision, but the damage was already done. With Xbox still 1 month away...
Dude, after a few days being forced out, you need to leave. Or we're gonna fire you. That's crazy. That's crazy. And you'll see this, and we'll talk about the timeline in a second, but everything that's about to happen with the Xbox One debacle and the Don Matrix stuff will also end very, very suddenly. You'll see. It's crazy.
From officially revealing its new console, it was already shrouded in controversies. As the days moved closer to this reveal event, there wasn't the level of excitement or anticipation you would expect from a new console showcase. Rather, there was an anxious hesitation as fans worried about what Microsoft would confirm to be true from these rumors. With all of the negative press and concerning rumors stacking up against them, it was time for Xbox to speak for themselves and get across their message to gamers on what they could expect from the next Xbox console. On May 21st, 2013, Microsoft hosted the reveal event, and what would ensue over the next hour and coming weeks would end up defining the entire console generation. The event was a disaster in every sense of the word, considered one of the worst console reveals in gaming history.
I'm sorry. It's just the face. The face of a man who doesn't realize he's about to destroy a brand. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Again, as we go through this, I'll make comments about him, I'm sure, that maybe are a little mean. But this is a man whose choices led to many people losing their jobs. It led to years of strife within the company itself, layoffs and things, all because of his choices. Meanwhile, you know what he did right as all of this implodes? He just casually leaves July 1st, 2013 to join Zynga as CEO. So like he just immediately like bailed. Was like, I'm good. So he's revealing this on May 21st, 2013. And then in July, he leaves the company. Made it like a month and a half after this reveal. And then he bails, leaves the building on fire, and goes off to become CEO of a mobile game company and make tons of money over there. Okay, so I do not feel bad for him. You should not feel bad for him. Okay? He literally failed upwards. It's crazy.
They start by showing off the console itself and revealing the official name Xbox One. I've always hated the name of this console, granted I'm a bit biased as I hate anything that titles itself with the number 1 after an original has already been released.
I also hate this. A lot of games did it too. Like I think Battlefield 1. I'm like, why are we doing that? Why do I have to do that? But all of this reminds me, like, you know, we've been talking about how Xbox has had like no positive press at all year, basically. It's just been bad news after bad news, after price hike, after bad news, after bad news. It's been like a consistent thing. And that is not a new thing. Okay. Like in this era, they're about to reveal the next generation Xbox that everybody should be super hyped for. And then like nobody was hyped for. Everybody was braced because all the rumors were that it was always online. You weren't going to be able to have used copies of games, which again, just process that for a second because we're kind of used to it. But again, just fast forward to today. Imagine if they announced the PlayStation 6 and the Xbox Series 15X Pro Asus ROG 3 and none of them include used game support. Like, can you imagine just how out of touch you have to be? And nowadays, people are buying online copies of games way more frequently than they were back then. And even today, I think it would go horribly if they tried to do that. And they were trying to do that in 2013. It's push for no used copies, nothing like that. It's crazy.
I think it's confusing and just annoying when speaking out loud. And I mean, seriously, try to have a conversation with someone who doesn't know video games about the original Xbox and the Xbox One and tell me they won't get confused. Regardless of how I feel about the One naming structure, the Xbox One was given that name for a very understandable reason. Xbox's goal with the Xbox One was to make it an all-in-one entertainment platform, home to not just video games, but also your TV, movies, music, and applications as well. This isn't that bad of a concept in theory. Most of the console manufacturers were were pushing for similar things or had pushed for similar things in the past. Sony's PlayStation 2 and 3 were famous for their support of DVDs and Blu-rays, making them a go-to entertainment device for many. Even Nintendo was pushing for this around this time, with their short-lived Nintendo TV initiative of the Wii U generation. What I'm trying to say is, the idea of Microsoft wanting their console to be an all-in-one entertainment system is not a strange or bad idea whatsoever. The problem was how desperately they tried to sell it. Microsoft chose to spend the entire first 30 minutes of the event talking about TV, movies, and the new Kinect device. We sat there for 10 minutes watching an Xbox representative yell at the Kinect to switch between watching The Price is Right and sports games, or how you could use
Connect! Change channel, Connect! Please! Everyone's watching, please! I also think that it didn't make sense to do it this way because, like, whose grandma is going to be watching this reveal for what cable box to buy? Like, nobody. The people watching this event were all gamers. They're the ones who are online. They're the ones who were aware of this reveal because the last generation was a gaming device. So they're watching to see what the next generation gaming device will be. And they spent the first half hour of it basically just talking about, like, I remember like the meme being TV, people cutting it together. And it's like the Xbox One presentation, but it's only TV. It's just like TV. This is a TV. It's so cringy, but it just showed again how out of touch they were with their own audience, or maybe the contempt they had for their audience because their audience wanted gaming stuff and they felt entitled to their support.
Xbox Snap to have both a movie and being open at the same time. Again, none of these features are inherently bad, especially Xbox Snap, which probably would have done great in today's era of Zoomers needing 3 different videos playing at a single time to stay entertained. But did this all really warrant 30 minutes of our time? Not to mention, all of this new tech and features were being built around Kinect, a device that many hardcore gamers had already written off. The Kinect was a strange device, selling incredibly well out of the gate, but having a lot of problems that turned away most players. And at the end of the day, the Kinect was a device that up until this point was seen as something for casual audiences, and casual audiences probably aren't watching an Xbox One reveal event, nor would they be buying a console day one. Regardless, they finally moved on and started talking about games.
I will say, me and my family, we had a Kinect because I think it came with our Xbox One, and we also had a Wii that my uncle had gotten us as a Christmas present. And they both had their own like Just Dance versions of apps or games or whatever. And I remember we all hated using the Kinect so bad because it sucked. So we would intentionally go and plug in and move the Wii from upstairs to downstairs into like the basement little playroom we had, specifically so we could do Just Dance down there because it worked so much better than the Kinect one that we would go through all of that hassle. Just at the end of the day, it just wasn't very good. It just wasn't very good. Now it's AI. Well, it certainly feels like that's the new focus. Dude, I got an update from my ROG Ally. I was playing Octopath Traveler last night. That's been my latest obsession. Fantastic. But I was playing Octopath Traveler on the handheld, and they updated Armory Crate, and I tapped it to just change the power profile from like turbo to performance or whatever so I could save some battery. And dude, even in that bar, they have Copilot's logo and stuff. They're even trying to shove AI crap into like the toolbar of Armory Crate on a handheld game device. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? I don't give a crap. Why would I want Copilot there? Like, what? It doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like such a boomer.
Keep in mind, we are 30 minutes into an hour-long showcase at this point, and we are seeing a video game for the first time. The games they did finally show were fine, but nothing overly exciting. It was pretty standard stuff like new sports games, a new Forza, and Call of Duty. They did show Halo though, but it was to announce a TV show, not a game. I'm not trying to discredit the games they showed, but it just wasn't enough to make up for the 30 minutes of TV and movie talk that came before it. The worst part was, this event left people with more questions than answers about some of the rumors regarding always-on connectivity or support of used games. As the press asked these questions, many of Xbox's responses seemed snarky and dismissive, almost like they were annoyed that people wanted these questions answered. One particularly infamous moment came when Jeff Keighley interviewed then Xbox CEO Don Matrick and asked him what a player should do if they don't have good internet access. Matrix's response was to buy an Xbox 360. You can actually hear Jeff fail to hold in his laugh as the CEO of a company unveiling a new product just told consumers to buy the old one instead. Reporters were also able to get them to confirm used games would indeed be restricted by Xbox One. Games would get tied.
Hold on, I want to hear it. I want to hear it. Hold on. I'm going to find the clip because we have to play the actual clip. We have to play it.
It's a great line for games.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think people are going to love it, and then they're going to understand what we're trying to create and how it links games and entertainment, the functionality of the box, some of the advantages that you get of having a box that is designed to use an online state. So that, to me, is a future-proof choice, and I think
future-proof because it's designed to be used online. Okay.
People could have arguably gone the other way if we didn't do it, and fortunately we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360. That's your message. If you don't, like it.
If you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device. I mean, seriously, when I read the blogs and thought about who's really the most impacted, there was a person who said, "Hey, I'm on a nuclear sub, and I don't even know what it means to be on a nuclear sub, but I've got to imagine."
We can tell. We know
that it's not easy to get an internet connection.
I can imagine it's hard to get an internet connection on a nuclear sub, but you should just buy a 360. You know? Again, all of this is happening. The total disaster is unfolding, and within 6 weeks he will leave the company to go be CEO of a mobile game company. Like, he had no concern for the health of the platform, for the long-term effect of his decisions. It was literally just chasing what he thought shareholders would want to hear. And I mean, he jumped ship the second he had the opportunity. Absolutely crazy.
To a user's ID and would then be unable to be sold in the normal by Xbox One. Games would get tied to a user's ID and would then be unable to be sold in the normal ways we're used to. Xbox never got into specifics of how exactly this would work though, claiming they would partner with retailers and or publishers, allowing them to charge a fee for games being played on a second ID. It was all incredibly confusing and frustrating. And
so the idea was that you buy a game, you play it, you take it back to GameStop, you sell it to them, and then when somebody else comes in to buy the used copy of the game, they would have to pay an additional fee, presumably to Microsoft, to get a license to play it used. Dude, that's crazy. But again, I can see how an executive who doesn't play games could think that's a good idea, where he's like, yeah, and then we get $10 every time somebody buys a used copy of a game. Great, because you remember in this era, the whole problem was around used copies of games. That was like a big problem for tons of companies. And you know what happened during this time? Everybody started pushing for like massive open world adventure games with massive play times on the AAA side. And it was later revealed, actually, the game director for AC3 a few months ago was doing an interview, and he said the reason that they pushed in AC3 in late 2012, the reason they pushed for that to be such a big game, big open world game, was because their directive from on high was, we need to get our games longer so players take longer to finish them, and therefore sell them less frequently or less quickly to secondhand retailers like GameStop. And then if somebody wants to buy the game, they have to go and buy it new, because on secondhand copies we make zero. But if you buy it new, we make some money. And this was Don's attempt at fixing that, because he's like, yeah, now we'll get $10, or whatever publisher will get $10 when you buy a game used. So we'll still make money even on used copies. It's great. Genius. I'm sure is what he thought.
Xbox's initial attitude towards this whole thing, as if players were wrong to feel this way, was certainly not helping. The Xbox One reveal had been a total disaster, and we'll talk later about just how harmful this really was, but for now, Xbox needed to keep the ball rolling as they prepared for another major event with E3 2013. I rewatched Xbox's E3 2013 press
Kojima!
conference for this video, and honestly, I expected way worse. The conference itself actually wasn't bad whatsoever, ditching all the talk of TV and voice commands for the Kinect. Most of this conference was spent talking about actual video games, and the games shown were pretty exciting, including some big new exclusive game announcements like Rise Son of Rome, Sunset Overdrive, and Dead Rising 3. Add into that some other major multi-platform games that made an appearance like Metal Gear Solid 5 and The Witcher 3, and this was genuinely a really strong showing from Xbox. Towards the end of the conference, they had the big moment of announcing the price of the console. It was announced that the Xbox One would retail for $499. Keep in mind, this price point was for the console itself, as well as the Kinect accessory, which would be bundled with every console, whether you wanted it or not. It had been a few weeks since the controversial Xbox One reveal event, and while those issues still loomed large, Xbox fans were understandably feeling a bit better immediately following this E3 showcase. That is, until it was time for Xbox's competitor to hold their press conference. Xbox fans, I'm sorry to do this to you, but we need to talk about PlayStation's E3 2013 press conference as well, because it is a huge part of this story. PlayStation was also promoting their new console at E3 this year, and their conference started off pretty normal. They showed off new games and features that would be coming to the PS4 console, just as Xbox had done a few hours earlier.
And it's important to understand that in this positioning, Sony was considered like kind of the underdog. The PS3 era didn't go as well for them as they wanted, coming off of the crazy success of the PS2. And as a result, like, they were hungry and they saw blood in the water with a lot of Microsoft's choices with the Xbox One. And this was their chance and they took advantage.
Changed. The then president and CEO of Sony Computer Entertainment America, Jack Tretton, walked onto the stage with a smile on his face he could hardly contain. As he begins speaking, I can only imagine the horrors of Xbox executives everywhere. Tretton begins going down the list.
Why is he smiling? Why is he so happy? Why is the seat? Oh no. Are they going to be cheaper? Oh God. And it's like, yeah. And they're also going to support used games and everything else.
List of every controversial Xbox One feature we've spoken about, and confirms they won't be present on PS4. With every statement he made, the crowd started going crazier and crazier. It's not all.
Again, it's so insane. Trade in games at retail, sell it to another person, lend it to a friend, or keep it forever. No duh. But that was like a major selling point because of how crazy Xbox was being.
Statement he made, the crowd started going crazier and crazier. It's not often you see one of the big three console manufacturers do something like this, especially nowadays, where they publicly call out the competition. In a matter of minutes, PlayStation went from the cocky, arrogant company we had seen during the PS3 generation to now being the company fighting for the people, giving consumers what they wanted. In my opinion, this moment is genuinely one of the most impactful events in gaming history, both for its effect on the gaming scene of that time, but also its effects on the gaming scene we have today. As if this moment wasn't big enough already, PlayStation had one more thing up their sleeves. At the end of their conference, Sony announced the price of the PS4 to be $399, $100 less than the Xbox One. The crowd went wild again, and as the stage lights faded, you could almost feel that PlayStation had just won the generation before it had even officially begun. With Xbox reeling after the...
And what's crazy is... what a freeze frame. They announced what price? What's crazy is they didn't have to launch it at 500. Like, again, that was because they bundled the Kinect in, a Kinect which nobody wanted. But they forced it in because they're like, no, you're gonna get it. You're gonna like it. You're gonna like it. Like, it's just so crazy. I can imagine $399. Oh God. But I guess, you know, but he probably wasn't feeling that because, again, I think when this was, I believe this was at E3 in June. I believe, maybe does that clip I showed have the date 12 years ago? This was June 13th of 2013 was this.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so this is June 13th. In 2 weeks, I think it was 2 weeks. Yeah, July 1st. So 2 weeks after this, he's gone. So he probably didn't give a crap, honestly. Because I've never been promoted to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar mobile game company. Confession time. It's never happened. But I would imagine it's a process longer than 2 weeks. So I'm guessing at this point, he already knew where he was going. He was like, no, in July, I'm out. In July, I'm out. So again, that little nugget makes this whole thing feel so extra toxic and stupid that he knew at this moment that none of this would affect him, that he was already headed out the door. Who cares? You know, it just makes it feel gross.
Embarrassment they faced at E3, it was clear something had to change. And so on June 19th, 2013, just 9 days after the E3 fiasco, Microsoft announced a complete Xbox 180. They announced that the console would no longer require online check-ins.
I just imagine, I think probably what happened is that he knew he was on his way out. He got a stern talking to from his bosses above him at Microsoft who were like, what are you doing? Have you seen the press? Have you seen what they're saying? And I'm sure he was like, okay, yeah, reverse it all. I don't give a crap. I'm headed out the door. I don't care.
Additionally, they would not be placing any sort of restriction on the sale of used games or the act of lending your game to a friend. The game—
Dude, that one is goated. Hold on, we need that clip again. The Shuhei one. How to share PS4 games. 20 million views.
This is how you share your games on PS4. Thanks.
PlayStation.
Dude, it's so freaking brilliant. And this is part of what I miss of this like era of the games industry, is that it was kind of goofy. It was like a little silly and irreverent. And I feel like we just don't get a lot of that nowadays. And I miss it, man. I really miss it because that's so funny. But can you imagine like the PlayStation of today doing something like that? I just can't imagine it, but maybe. I think it'd be so funny.
Gamers had won, their outrage had been heard, and thanks to a little help from PlayStation, Xbox was forced to go back on all of their anti-consumer policies. Unfortunately though, much of the damage was already done. The Xbox One officially released on November 22nd, 2013. Reception to the console was pretty positive.
Dude, and the dance sequences! We used to get dance breaks! You remember these? Wait, I think it was it the launch of the Kinect? Launch of the Kinect dance something. I just remember an ocean of people in purple shirts dancing. Oh yes, this is it. This is 15 years ago, November of 2010. They turned the comments off. I wonder why. Okay, they're launching the Kinect. Mark Wahlberg's there. Okay. Yeah, the purple shirts, dude. I remember the purple shirts. They rented out Times Square, the Toys R Us there and everything. And then they did this whole dance break. That was just the most bizarre thing. All wearing t-shirts that said, I am the controller. I am an Xbox controller. See, now everybody's a console. Back then, you were just the controller. But, you know, I guess we've graduated. It's just so crazy, dude. Like, I don't think you'd ever see this nowadays, but I would love to see it. Again, I miss the cringe. I miss it. We used to get stuff like this, which is patently ridiculous. Oh, those were the days, man. Anyway, continuing.
Positive all around, and the first few years went decently. But as the generation went on, the PS4 took a commanding lead and never looked back. PS4 was able to double the Xbox One in sales by the time it was all said and done. Now I could sit here and talk about why this happened, but I honestly don't think it's that interesting of a story. The Xbox One had an uphill battle after its controversial reveal, and they were just never able to recover. What I find far more intriguing, and what we'll cover throughout the rest of this video, is the lasting effect the Xbox One generation has had on the entire Xbox brand. We've seen plenty of consoles come and go, all with varying levels of success, and we've seen countless examples of companies having a miss and then being able to bounce back tremendously just one generation later. But in the case of the Xbox One, it seems that the impact was much more profound. Xbox's current console line, the Series X and S, are also struggling big time, with a recent report stating that the PS5 is outselling them 3-1. According to Xbox themselves, the Xbox One generation may be to blame, at least somewhat. The basis for our discussion will be from Phil Spencer's appearance on the Kinda Funny Xcast, which aired on May 4th, 2023. If you haven't seen this interview before, I highly recommend you go and watch the whole thing. Phil was very open and honest throughout, in a way that is rare to see from someone in his position. It was here he said, and I quote, "We lost the worst generation to lose in the Xbox One generation." Why is this? Well, as Phil himself mentions, most of it boils down to digital game libraries. libraries. The PS3 and 360
I should have, earlier I went into this. I should have just shut up and waited. They would go into it too. I will say, I think it would be very interesting. You know, people do these thought experiments all the time, where they're like, if I could have dinner with one historical person, who would it be, or whatever. I always am like, if I could have a no corpo speak drink with someone, like, you're not gonna try to spin anything, you're just gonna tell me honestly what you think about stuff. I would find it so fascinating to pick the brain of like a Phil Spencer. What does Phil Spencer think of Don Matrick? You know, what stories does he have? Because he worked with him and then replaced him. I would love to know what he had, like what kind of stories went on behind the scenes of disagreements. Maybe Phil agreed with it. I don't know. But I would love to hear some of that like dirty laundry and see that get aired. It'd be so fascinating because I think there's so much material there. It'd be really cool.
generation was the first time we could download full games from digital storefronts, as opposed to going out to the store and buying the disc. However, it wasn't until the PS4 and Xbox One generation that it became more common for people to ditch discs entirely. As we reach the end of that generation, and especially nowadays, there are significantly more people buying their games digitally than physically.
Shout out
What
Prey.
this meant was that for
Dude, Prey was 2017. I feel so old. That was May of 2017. That hurts.
nearly a decade, PS4 and Xbox One users were building giant digital game libraries that they understandably would not want to lose. With the PS5 and Xbox Series consoles being fully backwards compatible, this meant your digital game library would move with you, of course assuming you stuck with the same line of consoles. And so for most consumers, the decision of which next-gen console to buy was already made. They would be motivated to stick within the same ecosystem, as it would allow them to continue engaging with their digital libraries instead of having to start all over somewhere new. Unfortunately,
I also have to say, I think that like the messaging, and correct me if I'm wrong, I guess in chat, represent. I feel like the messaging this generation from Xbox has been like hilariously bad. Super inconsistent, super unclear and vague. It's never been clear what's going to be exclusive, if anything will be, why you should buy this console now instead of that one. Like, it's been all over the place. And I get it. They were also trying to juggle, you know, the acquisitions of like Activision Blizzard and ZeniMax. So because of that, they couldn't say things super clearly because it could affect FTC hearings and all of that. But the vibe has been so confusing. Even now, people are not super clear on what the strategy is moving forward. And I think that's no way to build an ecosystem. You know, for better or worse, with Apple, people know what they're getting into. When you buy an Apple device, people know I'm getting into this ecosystem. I'm jumping into the steel cage I might not ever be able to climb out of, because they're going to try to keep me in here. You know what you're getting into. You know they're going to build the ecosystem up. They're going to give you really impressive software that's designed to keep you contained and keep you inside their ecosystem. You know what you're getting. It's very, very clear. But with Xbox, it's been very, very not that, where there's been messaging suggesting that everything's going to be multi-platform, and then there's been messaging that other games are going to stay exclusive. Even back when like the porting to PlayStation stuff was starting, there was messaging saying, you know, well, we have like 4 games that we're bringing to PlayStation. And when asked about Halo, he's like, he wouldn't say that Halo was not coming to PlayStation, because of course it eventually would. But he wouldn't just say that, you know. I think it would have been much better served if they just came out very clearly in 2023 and it's like, everything's going multi-platform. We're not going to do the whole exclusive things. We're going to have the best hardware we can have on our consoles and encourage you to buy those. Maybe offering bundles or discounts to Game Pass if you're using an Xbox or whatever. Maybe, you know, probably not. But, you know, where our goal is to produce great games and distribute them to everybody. That's the goal. And full stop, you know. And if that's what he said just very clearly, there would have been great uproar and gnashing of teeth. Certainly there'd be people plenty upset, but at least then everybody would be on the same page, you know. Everybody would be. Consoles are not prestige objects like Apple. I do think actually PlayStation has tried very hard to build up themselves as a luxury prestige product, at least in the gaming space. and I would argue you can see this where people will like put up, you'll see it on like some YouTubers and streamers setups. They'll like in the background have the PS5 Pro box and the Elite, whatever they call it, DualSense Edge. They'll have that box in the corner so you can see that they bought those devices. It's like trying to flex on it. I think I at least I've seen it. Maybe I'm just reading into it, but I've seen that.
Fortunately for Xbox, there were double as many PS4 digital game libraries out there that people would want to stick by. And so once again, Xbox found themselves facing a major uphill battle.
Oh, actually, this is unrelated, sort of. But honest question, sorry, ADHD brain. Do you think they made, I had this thought the other day, do you think they intentionally made the PS5 really freaking awkward so that you couldn't just tuck it away on like your shelf, but you had to have like a lot of space for it? And because it was so weirdly shaped, you had to basically turn it into a set piece on your media center. I think they intentionally made it super freaking awkwardly shaped so you couldn't just get it into like the Tetris of your media center. You had to like clear off a shelf to make it a statement, a centerpiece that everybody could see. It's my conspiracy theory, at least, is that they made it intentionally awkward.
To not only convince someone to buy an Xbox Series console, but also convince that same someone to ditch their last 8 years of digital purchases. It didn't used to be this way. Every console was a clean slate, usually with little to no connection to the previous ones. You could go from a Nintendo 64 to a PS2 to an Xbox 360 without much worry. But nowadays, there is way more incentive to stick with one brand and ecosystem.
Baggage.
And as Phil says, the last generation where switching console manufacturers was viable for most people was indeed the Xbox One generation, the generation that Xbox lost handily. What this has,
well, I think it also was exacerbated by the fact that the this generation has had, it probably had, I think, the biggest cross-generational gap of any generation I can think of, meaning that there was a period for like 2 or 3 years, granted it was coming out of COVID, but like there's a period of 2 to 3 years where everything that was coming out was also cross-generational, and it was cross like, you know, on PS4 and then also on PS5. And I think that exacerbated it because that made gamers much more reliant on their old library, as opposed to like the way they used to do it, where it was just a clean cut. It's like next gen, now all the games coming are for that next gen. Maybe we have a game for the last gen, like an AC Rogue or something, but now that we're in the next gen, this is a next gen product, next gen game. That's what we're doing. And so I think the cross-generational thing made it worse for Xbox than it normally would have been. But it was also because all of the other publishers and everybody else wanted to double dip. And so they were making cross-gen games. And I think that that just compounded it.
Caused is a scenario where Xbox has been forced to play catch up for the better part of 10 years now. And I think almost everything you've seen out of Xbox over the last decade, both good and bad, all boils down to this fact. The Xbox brand is in a strange place at the moment. As I'm sure you have all seen, Xbox has begun releasing previously exclusive games on rival hardware like PS5 and Switch. Games like Sea of Thieves or Hi-Fi Rush were among the first batch to make the jump, but we're seeing that list continue to grow, including the recent announcement that Indiana Jones: The Great Circle will be coming to PS5 just a few months after its Xbox release. It has started to feel like Xbox is slowly creeping towards becoming a third party instead of a console manufacturer. Is this simply because of the poor sales of Series X and S, or is there something more here? I think a big reason for it is two major pivots Xbox made during the struggles of Xbox One. The first is their affinity for big acquisitions. Xbox first-party games struggled throughout the Xbox One generation, and was a big reason why that console couldn't keep up with the PS4. It was a strange phenomenon, as Xbox had been pretty consistent with their first-party output since the original Xbox. And while the Xbox One generation started out decently, things got worse as the years went on. Many first-party releases were of questionable quality, and there were long drought periods where players were getting almost nothing. With Xbox struggling to supply meaningful first-party games on their own, they looked outward. In 2020, they purchased Bethesda, and at that time were
I will say Matt Booty, this guy, he is head of Microsoft Studios, and now I guess head of Xbox Game Studios is his official title. But he is an interesting character because he's the guy that's been in charge of this for a long time. And you can see in this article from 2024, he said, we're beginning to hit our stride with Game Pass strategy and studio closures. And all the Variety did him dirty with that. But I'm sorry, I've never actually met him. I've been at events with him there, and like we've been in the same space, and he seems like a nice guy, but he seems like, there's no nice way of saying this, he seems bad at his job, you know? Like if your job is to head up the studios and maintain a certain quality standard and get things out on time and clearly message what those games are and support the studios and, you know, not lay off the talent. It seems like he's bad at his job, but he's still there. And that makes that whenever you see something like that, where it's like, this person seems to be doing a bad job to me, but they're still like climbing the corporate ladder, still getting promotions, they still have the job. How is that possible? That should give you a moment where you go, okay, maybe it's bad by my standards, but does that mean it's bad by Microsoft's standards? Those are two different things, you know? Just because from a gamer's perspective, consistency hasn't been super high, you know, or quality's not been incredibly high or consistent. Like PlayStation, you can trust that if it's a first-party game from one of their first-party studios and, you know, it's one of their big tentpole AAA releases, whether it's a God of War, Wolverine, Intergalactic, Ghost of Yotei, whatever it is, it's going to be a very good game. With Xbox, it's like, maybe, or it'll be just fine. But again, that assumes that that's what their goals are. Their goals are probably different, it would seem. Their goal is not to make 10 out of 10 games. Their goals are to create games that keep you subscribed to Game Pass. And to do that efficiently, quickly, as cheaply as possible. And I think in that pursuit, he has been successful. Because they have managed to do that, and they have managed to shove stuff out. We'll see if that maintains over the next, like, 10 years, but I think, you know, for them, if it's 30-40% more expensive to go from an 8 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10, that probably the math doesn't math, especially on a service like Game Pass. It just doesn't really matter. Like, as long as people are playing and staying subscribed, they're happy. So I think that's the standard. That's the shift where it doesn't, he might be bad at his job from our perspective by our standards, but that's the point, is our standards are not the same as the ones he's being judged against.
Saying their games would now be exclusive to Xbox and PC. For the first few years, this held true, with games like Starfield and Redfall skipping rival platforms. Meanwhile, Xbox had their eyes on an even bigger target.
I'm sorry, this is funny. They killed the brand. Someone did a bad job. Fair. You're like, the brand was alive. Now it is dead. Something went wrong. That's fair, honestly. I think without a doubt, to me, the brand reputation is quite poor right now. I think that when people right now hear Xbox, it's not even really clear what you're talking about, which is crazy. But like you say, PlayStation, people immediately are like, okay, so the console / gaming brand. With Xbox, it's like, so it's the box, but then it's also the cloud streaming, and it's also this handheld made by Asus, but then it's also my phone. So it's like a software platform, but it's also still the box. Like, it's just not very clear. Their messaging has always been terrible. I mean, again, just the naming conventions. The Xbox, then the Xbox 360, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, Xbox ROG, Xbox Ally X. Like, their naming conventions and communication have always been terrible. I think it's more of a Microsoft thing, but the communication has been where they've really suffered.
2022, they announced they would be purchasing Activision Blizzard. Immediately, the questions began of whether this meant games like Call of Duty would no longer be on PlayStation. And at first, Xbox was not committing that they wouldn't make Call of Duty an exclusive. But then the FTC got involved and it was a huge thing, and in the end, they made a deal with PlayStation to keep COD coming to the platform. And really, as the years have gone on, it seems that basically none of Activision Blizzard's games will be exclusive to Xbox. Meanwhile, more and more games within Bethesda are not going to stay exclusive either, including the previously mentioned upcoming Indiana Jones game and Doom: The Dark Ages. It was a nice,
which ended up being very good. Indiana Jones is very good. Really like it.
nice power play by Xbox to buy these teams, but in all honesty, I don't think there was any world where they could have realistically kept these games exclusive. And the main reason for that is Game Pass. Game Pass first launched in 2017 during the middle of the Xbox One generation. It was one of Xbox's biggest moves of that generation to try and make a splash. Game Pass is a simple subscription service that grants players access to hundreds of games. But what makes Game Pass different is the inclusion of Day 1 games coming to the service the same day they are released. This included major first-party games such as Sea of Thieves and Forza Horizon 4 releasing on Game Pass the very same day they were released for purchase. This was huge. No other company was doing this at the time, and it made Game Pass the absolute best deal in gaming. I often joke about Game Pass, saying it is literally too good of a deal, to the point where I don't even understand how they're making any money off of it. In fact, Game Pass is such a good deal that if you own an Xbox console, it really doesn't make any sense to not have it. In other words, a lot of Xbox players find themselves very rarely actually buying games, instead just playing everything on Game Pass. In a sense, Xbox introduced a subscription service so good, they accidentally trained their audience to never buy games again. This becomes quite a bit.
Well, yeah. And I mean, you shouldn't be surprised if you build your brand from that 2017 era onward. You build your brand around being the most cost effective, the cheapest, the most affordable, whatever word you want to use. You shouldn't be surprised when you have a very, very price sensitive audience. And then like they come along and they raise the cost and price of their consoles significantly by like $100, $200. And then they act shocked that people are upset about it. It's like, well, what did you expect? You know, like your whole brand has been about being the most affordable, the best bang for the buck in gaming. And then you come along and your price hikes on your consoles and your hardware are egregious. And you're like, what do you, well, I mean, tariffs. You know, I mean, they kind of did this to themselves, certainly, at least as far as I can tell. And as we know now, we didn't know this when this video first dropped. This is a video from 2024, but now we know that it's been a rough, the math is rough. I mean, the estimated losses of Call of Duty being included in Game Pass, they estimated that they lost roughly $300 million in sales by it being on Game Pass. So all of those people that would have bought it at full price at 70 did not buy it because they got it on Game Pass. And the amount of losses, the gap between what they made and what they would have gotten was $300 million. And when you look at Game Pass as a service, they've got to make that money up somewhere. And it comes from all of the others. It comes from subsidizing the losses with everybody else. So Call of Duty is sort of a loss leader. Amazing to say that, but they lose a good chunk of money on Call of Duty being on Game Pass, but then they try to make it up with games like a Fallout 4 Creations system or Fallout 76, and they try to make it up with all these other games that they try to put live service components into, and that lifts it up and covers some of those losses. Because again, all of this is happening in the context also of something we didn't know when this video first dropped, which is that now it's clear Amy Hood, the CFO of Microsoft, has mandated that every department within Microsoft, including Xbox, needs to hit 30% profit margin on everything. So, woof. In the games industry, it's typical to hit about 12%. Like, they're expected to find just under 3 times the profitability as every other game developer and publisher in the industry. Easier said than done. That's why you see all of these companies starting to like desperately lay people off. They're trying to use AI to increase margins. They're trying to put microtransactions and DLC, whatever they can come up with to try and boost margins.
Big problem after acquiring 2 of the biggest third-party studios in the world. And
how bad does everything have to be for everything to be hitting 30%? Do you mean how bad are things within the company that they need to mandate that goal? Or do you mean how bad would they have to treat like employees and everything to hit the 30% goal? Basically, my understanding is a 30% margin is something you can achieve within data centers and AI infrastructure stuff. And like data centers, you can hit 30% margin just fine. Very, very doable. You cannot do that in the gaming industry, at least not easily. Mobile games can hit 30%. You can't hit 30% in console games traditionally. You just can't. It doesn't work. Gamers are not willing to spend that much for cheap games like that. But anyway.
Now having to support them. Game Pass has a ton of subscribers across Xbox and PC, and with them recently raising prices and adding more expensive tiers, Game Pass definitely does make a lot of money, but it doesn't make enough money to support all of Bethesda and Activision Blizzard single-handedly. That's just not possible. And so Xbox was forced to look for other ways to increase their revenue, leading to the games on rival platforms pivot that we've seen. And so that brings us to the present day. With Xbox console sales struggling and their previously exclusive games coming to rival platforms, many are wondering if Xbox will even be making consoles for much longer. For now, Microsoft's messaging has indicated that they will give it one more go with another new console generation. But if that one fails too, there is a legitimate scenario where Xbox no longer makes consoles and instead goes the route of Sega. It's pretty interesting to lay it all out like this and see it this way. The massive miscalculations Xbox made during the reveal of the Xbox One led to a deterioration of the Xbox brand and a failed Xbox One generation. This failed generation led Xbox into the Game Pass and acquisition era, two things that actually don't mix together very well at all. This very thing has cornered them into a position where they're forced to act more as a third party than they had ever anticipated. I find this timeline and story incredibly interesting, and I am so intrigued to see where Xbox tries to take things from here. I hope Xbox can find some way to bounce back, because we need that kind of competition in the console space. But for now, Xbox appears to be on a crash course to become a third-party publisher. Ironically, they would probably make more money doing so, as they would genuinely become the biggest third-party publisher out there in an instant. But will they dare to make that drastic of a decision, or will they continue floating along as they are now, making consoles while sprinkling more and more games onto rival hardware? Only time will tell.
I think what's going to happen, these are my big brain predictions, okay? Buckle up. Here we go, because you're going to be able to grade me against this in the years to come. I think what happens, 2028, I think they launch the next generation of consoles. I think either shortly before or shortly after it's announced that Phil Spencer is going to be retiring. I think he will be replaced by Sarah Bond. Sarah Bond is she is through and through corporate business executive, okay? Like she's a shark, okay? Do not underestimate her. She came from basically nothing and then climbed the ranks of multiple different companies to end up as president of Xbox today. And I think that they are setting her up to be the next CEO of Xbox after Phil leaves. I think that she's being she's going to be put in that position by Satya Nadella, who ultimately will make the choice. And the reason I think that is because her role during the FTC hearings was specifically to get the FTC lawsuit settled, to get the Activision Blizzard deal closed, $70 billion deal. And it was basically on her shoulders to get it done. And she did. And I think Satya likes that. And I also think Satya likes that she, no doubt, will play the corporate game. If they're like, hey, you need to lay off 10% of your workforce, she'll do it. Her background is actually at a business consultation firm where a lot of the work they did was in going to big firms and finding where to cut fat and trim the budgets and stuff. So she is pure corporate executive, and I think that that's probably who's going to replace Phil when he's retiring. Matt Booty probably stays where he's at. Maybe he becomes president of Xbox, takes Sarah's position. I don't know. We'll see. That's my expectation and guess. Beyond that, in terms of the actual hardware, I think probably what happens is that over the next 5 to 10 years, it will continue to kind of develop the way it has, where they're going to rely a lot more on third-party hardware manufacturing. So you're going to see more ROG, Xbox Allies, or whatever. And I think that they will still make their own hardware, but I think it's going to take the form of the Surface laptops. And basically these are Microsoft laptops that they manufacture, they produce and everything, but they are not the focus. Yes, these are Microsoft manufactured laptops. It's a Microsoft laptop, but I mean, it's not their focus. This is not like the MacBook Pro for Apple, where they're putting a lot of effort into it. For them, it's a relatively low effort endeavor. So that's where I think that they'll go. I think they probably will always have an Xbox device available, but I'm not sure if it's going to go much beyond that. So sorry. was gonna try to just covertly switch back to this shot, and then I couldn't keep a straight face. Sorry, I'm not professional. Not professional. Sorry, very sorry. Not professional. I should be more professional. Sarah Bond lacks gaming ethos. I don't care if she's a corporate shark or not. Well, I guess I could be clear. I'm not saying she is who I would put in charge if I were in charge. If I were in charge, I would not put Sarah Bond in charge. I would not put Matt Booty in charge. Hell, I don't think I'd put Phil Spencer in charge. So, to be clear, this is a difference between what I want and what I think is going to happen, okay? Just because I think this is going to happen does not mean it's what I want, okay? It's the same thing with like the Activision Blizzard acquisition. I said back when that was happening, I was like, no, if I were the God Emperor of gaming, I would not have this happen. Like I would shut this deal down. I think consolidation of these big publishers is bad for the industry. Same with ZeniMax buying out or being bought out by Xbox. I think that's bad for the industry. But unfortunately for all of us, I'm not the God Emperor of gaming. So I don't get to choose. But if I have to guess what I think Satya and Hood and everybody, what I think that they're going to do, I think that they're going to put another corporate shark like Sarah Bond in that position. That's what I think. He took my thing. Red flag.